It was a partnership that felt vital, born in the simmering heat of a fictional Mississippi town called Sparta. A white police chief, a black detective, and the slow, hard-won burn of progress. On our screens, Carroll O'Connor's Chief Gillespie and Howard Rollins' Detective Tibbs were a moral compass, solving the crimes that tore at the fabric of their community. But the men themselves were facing battles far more insidious than any TV villain, private wars with addiction and grief that would lead to a sorrow more profound than any script could ever write. Carroll O'Connor as Chief Bill Gillespie, the king who found redemption in the Deep South. Born on August 2, 1924 in the Bronx, New York, Carroll, O'Connor was a titan of television. Already a legend for playing Archie Bunker, he stepped into the humid, racially charged world of Sparta, Mississippi at the age of 63 to play Chief Bill Gillespie. On screen, he was a force of nature, a gruff, stubborn lawman struggling to shed the prejudices of the Old South to find common ground with his black detective. He brought a lion-in-winter quality to the role. His voice was gravel and authority. His eyes held a weary wisdom. He wasn't just solving crimes, he was portraying the slow, painful evolution of the American soul. He was the father figure of the precinct, tough as old leather, but possessing a hidden capacity for deep, profound love. But behind the badge lay a father's breaking heart. Carroll O'Connor lived a haunting reality that no parent should endure. While playing a protector on TV, he was helpless to save his own adopted son, Hugh O'Connor, who played Lonnie Jamison from the demons of drug addiction. The two worked side by side, but Carroll watched in silent desperation as his son withered away. On March 28, 1995, his worst nightmare came true. Hugh committed suicide. The pain shattered Carroll. He channeled his unspeakable tragedy into a ferocious public crusade against drug dealers, calling them murderers. He spent his final years as a man hollowed out by grief, his famous spirit crushed by the guilt of a father who felt he had failed his boy. The tears we saw in later episodes were not acting. They were the real, raw wounds of a man whose future had been stolen by violence and addiction. Carroll O'Connor reunited with his son on June 21, 2001, passing away from a heart attack at the age of 76. Today, in late 2025, his legacy is colossal yet poignant. He is remembered not just as a brilliant actor, but as a warrior for justice, who spent his dying breath fighting the drug epidemic that destroyed his family. His resting place is a solemn reminder of a quiet tragedy that fame could not cure. He remains the chief, forever patrolling the line between the law and the heart, carrying a grief as heavy as the humid southern air. Howard E. Rollins, Jr. as Virgil Tibbs, the dignified detective fighting a private war. Born on October 17, 1950 in Baltimore, Maryland, Howard E. Rollins, Jr. was a performer of immense gravity and grace. An Oscar-nominated actor for Ragtime, he brought a sharp intellectual intensity to the role of Virgil Tibbs at the age of 37. To the audience, Tibbs was the moral compass of Sparta, impeccably dressed, fiercely intelligent, and unyieldingly dignified in the face of racism. He was the knight in a suit, a man who commanded respect with a single glare. His chemistry with Carroll O'Connor was electric, representing a hope for racial reconciliation. He was the cool, calm professional who seemed to rise above the grit of the streets he patrolled. However, the man who played the pillar of law was slowly crumbling inside. Howard led a double life of chaotic destruction. He battled a severe addiction to crack cocaine and alcohol, leading to multiple high-profile arrests that humiliated him and jeopardized the show. He was eventually fired and replaced a professional neglect born of his demons. But the darker, more silent pain was his secret battle with AIDS-related lymphoma. In the early 90s, the stigma was terrifying. He often wore wigs to hide hair loss from chemotherapy, forcing a smile while his body was withering. He died 1,000 deaths in the tabloids before his heart stopped. It is a heartbreaking contrast. The man who played the smartest detective on TV was lost in a labyrinth of self-destruction and sickness, dying alone in a hospital room, far from the glory he deserved. Howard E. Rollins, Jr. passed away on December 8, 1996, at the tragically young age of 46. Now, in November 2025, nearly 3 decades later, the scandals have faded, leaving only the brilliance of his art. We mourn the future stolen by addiction and disease. He is remembered as a talent of Shakespearean depth who burned too bright and too fast. He taught us dignity on screen even as he struggled to find peace in life. He remains the eternal Virgil Tibbs, standing tall in the heat, forever young and forever missed. Hugh O'Connor as Lonnie Jamison, the son who lived and died in the shadow of a giant. Born on April 7, 1962 in Rome, Italy, and adopted by Carroll O'Connor. Just days later, Hugh O'Connor was the prince of a Hollywood dynasty. He joined the cast as Lieutenant Lonnie Jamison at the age of 26, working daily under the watchful eye of his famous father. On screen, Lonnie was the earnest, loyal officer, often the softer side of the law. He had a gentle presence, a handsome face, and a palpable desire to please. To the viewers, he was the lucky son inheriting the kingdom safe under the wing of the chief. He seemed to have it all: the name, the job, and the love of a father who adored him beyond measure. But the reality was a quiet tragedy of crushing expectations and inner demons. Hugh struggled immensely with the pressure of being Carroll O'Connor's son, often feeling he hadn't earned his place. To cope with the anxiety and a lifelong feeling of not belonging, he turned to drugs. His addiction became a monster that devoured his promise. Despite his father's desperate attempts to save him, rehab's interventions pleading Hugh could not escape the darkness. On his 3rd wedding anniversary, in a heartbreaking moment that shook the world, he called his father to say goodbye. He took his own life, leaving behind a young widow and a father who would never recover. He was a fragile soul, crushed by the weight of a world he didn't know how to navigate, a lost boy in a policeman's uniform. Hugh O'Connor died by suicide on March 28, 1995, at the age of 32. Today, in 2025, his memory is inextricably linked to the sorrow of his father. He is the tragic symbol of the pain that money and fame cannot fix. His life serves as a somber reminder of the fragility of mental health. He rests eternally, no longer in the shadow, but in the light of our compassion. We remember him not for how he died, but for the gentle spirit he tried so hard to share with the world. Carl Weathers as Chief Hampton Forbes, the invincible titan who reminded us of fragility, born on January 14, 1948 in New Orleans, Louisiana. Carl Weathers was the epitome of physical perfection and charisma. Before he pinned on the badge of Chief Hampton Forbes in the final season 1993 at the age of 45, he was already a cinematic god, the legendary Apollo Creed who traded blows with Rocky Balboa. He arrived in Sparta not just as a replacement for Carroll O'Connor, but as a new kind of energy, younger, sharper, and carrying the aura of an action hero. To the audience, he was unbreakable. With his radiant eyes, athletic build, and commanding presence, he represented strength in its purest form. He was the man who could handle anything, a symbol of vitality that seemed immune to the ravages of time or weakness. Yet the tragedy of Carl Weathers lies in the shocking contrast between his screen immortality and human mortality. For decades, he was trapped in the gladiator persona. People saw the muscles, not the man. He lived with the immense pressure of always having to be the strongest in the room, a cruel condition of masculinity that allows for no vulnerability. While he projected power, he quietly navigated the physical toll of a life spent in grueling athletic and action roles. His silent pain was the wear and tear that the camera never showed. The world was shattered when this symbol of health passed away peacefully in his sleep, revealing that even the mightiest hearts can stop without warning. It was a haunting moment that stripped away our illusions of permanence. The man who survived the predator could not survive the quiet thief of time. Carl Weathers departed this world on February 1, 2024, at the age of 76. Now, in late 2025, the shock of his loss still reverberates. He died due to atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, a stark reminder of the hidden battles within. He leaves behind a legacy of thunderous applause and quiet grace. He taught us that true strength isn't about muscles, but about the kindness you show when the gloves come off. He rests now an eternal champion who finally found a peace that action scenes could never provide. Crystal Fox as Luann Corbin, the silent warrior waiting for her dawn. Born on January 1st, 1964 in Tryon, North Carolina, Crystal Fox brought a quiet, steely determination to the Sparta police force. Joining the cast in 1989 at the youthful age of 25, she played Officer Luann Corbin, one of the few prominent black female law enforcement officers on television at the time. She was the calm in the storm, possessing a warm, thoughtful voice and a gaze that could pierce through lies. To the viewers, Luann was the picture of competence and moral integrity, a woman who stood shoulder to shoulder with the men, often surpassing them in wisdom. She represented the rising tide of a new South, dignified and resilient. However, Crystal Fox endured the tragedy of the overlooked. For decades, her talent was pushed aside by an industry that didn't know how to value a black woman who refused to play stereotypes. She lived through a career winter, working tirelessly in the background while lesser talents took the spotlight. There is a deep emotional strain in being excellent, but invisible. She carried the silent burden of financial instability common to working actors, watching years tick by without the breakout role she deserved. Her struggle wasn't with addiction, but with the crushing weight of rejection and the fear that her best work would be forgotten. She was a queen in exile, maintaining her dignity while the industry ignored her royalty, fighting a lonely battle to prove that she was more than just a supporting face in a male-dominated world. As of November 25, 2025, Crystal Fox is 61 years old and is finally basking in the Indian summer of her career. After years of perseverance, she found massive acclaim in the haves and the have-nots and Big Little Lies. She is a living testament to patience. She didn't let the silence of the middle years break her spirit. She stands today not as a victim, but as a survivor of Hollywood's indifference, proving that sometimes the longest road leads to the most beautiful view. Alan Autry as Bubba Skinner, the Iron Man forged in the fires of poverty. Born on July 31, 1952, in Shreveport, Louisiana, Alan Autry. Born Carlos Brown was the physical anchor of the Sparta Police Department. He took on the role of Captain Bubba Skinner at the age of 36, bringing with him the imposing physique of a former NFL quarterback. On screen, Bubba was the good old boy, with a heart of gold, tough, loyal, and physically intimidating, yet capable of immense tenderness. He was the protector of the innocent, the man you wanted on your side in a bar fight. To the audience, he was the simple, sturdy oak of the town, a man who seemed born with a silver badge on his chest and a stable home behind him. But the reality of Alan Autry's life was far from the stability he portrayed. He was born into the unspeakable tragedy of rural poverty, the son of a migrant worker family. He grew up picking cotton in the scorching fields of the San Joaquin Valley, living in labor camps with dirt floors. His father abandoned the family when Alan was just a baby, leaving a void of fatherhood that haunted him for life. He carried the deep emotional scars of a child who had nothing fighting his way out of the dirt through sheer physical will. Even in Hollywood, he struggled with the Bubba stereotype, fighting to be seen as an intelligent man despite his southern drawl. His life was a constant battle against his origins, a silent war to prove he was more than the poor boy from the fields or the brute on the screen. Today, on November 25, 2025, Alan Autry is 73 years old. He has lived a life of remarkable transformation, pivoting from acting to becoming the mayor of Fresno, California, serving the very people he once toiled alongside in the fields. He found his emotional anchor in faith and public service. He is no longer just the tough cop. He is a statesman and a survivor. His journey from the cotton fields to City Hall is a powerful American epic, reminding us that where you start does not dictate where you finish. Anne Marie Johnson as Althea Tibbs, the elegant outsider who carried the weight of dignity. Born on July 18, 1960 in Los Angeles, California, Anne-Marie Johnson brought a breath of cosmopolitan sophistication to the dusty roads of Sparta. Taking on the role of Althea Tibbs at the age of 28, she was the perfect counterpart to Howard E. Rollins, Jr. With her radiant eyes, aristocratic voice, and graceful presence, she portrayed a woman who was educated, independent, and fiercely supportive. She wasn't just a detective's wife. She was a guidance counselor and a moral anchor representing the modern African-American woman navigating a South that was still grappling with its ghosts. To the audience, she was the picture of poise, a woman who could walk through fire without letting her smile falter. Yet behind the elegance lay the quiet struggle of isolation. Anne-Marie Johnson bore the heavy burden of representation. In an era with few leading roles for Black women, she felt the immense pressure to be flawless, to never show weakness, lest she let down an entire community. This emotional strain was compounded by the loneliness of her character. On screen, Althea was often treated as an outsider in Sparta, and off-screen, Anne-Marie fought a silent war against an industry that wanted to keep her in a box. She watched her on-screen husband Howard deteriorate from addiction, suffering the heartbreak of trying to hold a fictional marriage together while the real man beside her was falling apart. She lived with the constant anxiety of a future stolen by the instability of her co-star and the limitations of Hollywood, feeling the deep despair of being a talent that the industry respected but rarely knew how to utilize fully. Today, on November 25, 2025, Anne-Marie Johnson is 65 years old. She remains a pillar of strength, having transitioned from the screen to become a fierce advocate for actors' rights within the SAG-AFTRA union. She didn't fade into the background. She became a leader. Her legacy is one of fragile strength. She survived the chaos of the show and the fickleness of fame with her head held high. She teaches us that true dignity isn't just about how you look in the spotlight, but how you fight for others in the shadows. David Hart as Officer Parker Williams, the gentle soul masked by a clown's smile. Born on February 6, 1954 in Otis Orchards, Washington. David Hart captured the hearts of millions as the lovable, slightly bumbling Officer Parker Williams. Joining the force at the age of 34, he was the antithesis of the hard-boiled cop. With his soft features and innocent demeanor, Parker was the heart of gold in a precinct of tough guys. He was the comic relief, the man who treated everyone with kindness regardless of their crime. To the viewers, he was the safe harbor, a reminder that policing could be done with a smile and a gentle hand. He represented the purity of a small town, a character who seemed untouched by the darkness of the crimes he investigated. However, David Hart lived the tragedy of the jester. He was a classically trained actor capable of immense depth, yet he became trapped in the persona of the goofy deputy. He suffered from professional neglect, where the industry refused to see past the badge and the belly laugh. There is a silent pain in being loved for your foolishness, but ignored for your seriousness. He watched as his peers moved on to gritty dramas while he remained frozen in time as Parker. The financial strain of being a character actor is a lonely reality that fans rarely see. When the laughter stops, the phone stops ringing. He carried the emotional weight of being the nice guy in a cutthroat business, a man whose artistic soul was often pushed aside for the sake of an easy joke. As of November 25, 2025, David Hart is 71 years old. He has lived a quiet life away from the glare of Hollywood, finding peace in his family and faith. He is the unsung hero of our memories. While he didn't chase the limelight, his portrayal of Parker remains a haunting moment of pure goodness in a cynical world. He reminds us that sometimes the greatest courage is simply remaining kind in a world that rewards cruelty. Geoffrey Thorne as Officer Willson, Sweet, the stifled voice that finally screamed on paper. Born on January 20, 1970 in Washington, D.C., Geoffrey Thorne was the young blood injected into the aging veins of the Sparta police. He first appeared on the show at the tender age of 18, eventually becoming a regular face of the new generation. As Officer Willson, Sweet, he was earnest, eager, and represented the future of law enforcement. With a youthful energy and a sharp mind, he was the rookie who looked up to Tibbs and Skinner. To the audience, he was the symbol of hope, a young black man stepping into authority with a sense of duty and optimism, promising that the next generation would be better, smarter, and fairer. But beneath the uniform, Geoffrey Thorne was suffocating. He wasn't just an actor. He was a writer, a creator, a visionary trapped in a role that often reduced him to a background prop. He felt the deep despair of intellectual isolation, standing on marks and reciting lines that didn't challenge his brilliant mind. He endured the quiet tragedy of the intelligent actor realizing that his face was wanted, but his voice was not. He saw the glass ceiling for actors of color in the 90s, where the roles were limited to cops or criminals. The emotional distance between who he was a storyteller and what he did hold a gun on camera created a profound internal conflict. He walked away from the screen not out of failure, but out of a desperate need to be heard, leaving behind the fame to find his own words. Today, on November 25th, 2025, Geoffrey Thorne is 55 years old and has achieved a magnificent reinvention. He is no longer Officer Sweet. He is a celebrated novelist and screenwriter for franchises like Marvel. He turned his silence into a roar, proving that the pen is indeed mightier than the badge. His journey is a lesson in self-worth. When the world tries to typecast you, you have the power to write a new character for yourself. He is the one who escaped the trap of nostalgia to build a future of his own design. The cases in Sparta are all closed now. The final credits have rolled. What's left is the ghost of a powerful on-screen friendship and the heartbreaking reality of what happened when the cameras stopped. We lost Howard Rollins, the brilliant controlled detective who couldn't conquer his own demons, his life a quiet tragedy of immense talent lost too soon. And we watched Carroll O'Connor, the tough principled chief, endure a father's ultimate nightmare, turning his devastating public grief into his life's final most important cause. Their show was about justice, but their lives became a testament to a different kind of endurance, a solemn reminder of the deep human price often paid by the men who bring our heroes to life. Denise Nicholas as Harriet DeLong, the Iron Magnolia who wept in silence. Born on July 12, 1944 in Detroit, Michigan. Denise Nicholas was already a civil rights icon and a television pioneer before she walked into the heated atmosphere of Sparta at the age of 45. As Councilwoman Harriet DeLong, she was the embodiment of regal intelligence and unyielding moral strength. She played the woman who dared to love Chief Gillespie, breaking one of television's ultimate taboos, interracial marriage in the Deep South. To the audience, she was a figure of grace under fire, a woman with a commanding presence who could silence a room with a whisper. She represented the changing face of America, dignified, powerful, and fiercely protective of her heart. She was the sophisticated anchor that grounded the show's turbulent emotional landscape. But behind that composed, aristocratic voice lay a heart shattered by an unspeakable tragedy. In 1980, years before she arrived in Sparta, her beloved younger sister Michelle was brutally murdered at an airport, a crime that remained unsolved for a tormented period. Denise had to live with this heartbreaking reality, carrying the grief of a survivor while playing a character who believed in the justice system. Imagine the emotional strain of portraying a woman of law and order while your own life has been ripped apart by senseless violence. She also navigated the lonely waters of being a black woman in Hollywood during a time of intense change, facing the social stigma and resistance against her on-screen romance. She was a woman fighting two wars, one for her career and one for her peace of mind, hiding her silent pain behind a mask of perfect composure. Today, on November 25, 2025, Denise Nicholas is 81 years old. She has gracefully transitioned from actress to acclaimed author, pouring her soul into literature like freshwater road. She turned her deep despair into art, using her words to heal the wounds that time could not fully close. She stands as a living monument to resilience, a woman who looked tragedy in the eye and refused to blink. Her legacy is one of quiet discipline and intellect. She taught us that the strongest hearts are often the ones that have been broken the most times. Randall Franks as Officer Randy Goode, the fiddler playing a lullaby for a dying world. Born on September 23, 1966 in Gainesville, Georgia, Randall Franks brought the authentic soul of Appalachia to the screen. Joining the cast as the young Officer Randy Goode at the age of 22, he was the boyish, innocent face of the department. But Randall was more than an actor. He was a virtuoso fiddler, a musical prodigy who infused the show with the mournful, beautiful sounds of the mountains. To the audience, he was the gentle spirit, the officer who seemed more comfortable holding a violin bow than a revolver. He represented the preservation of a simpler, kinder time, a character who brought a nostalgic charm to the gritty police work, reminding us that even in the heat of crime, there was still room for a song. However, Randall Franks lived the quiet tragedy of the caretaker. While Hollywood beckoned with its bright lights, Randall's heart was tethered to his roots and his family. He spent years in a quiet and solitary life of devotion, caring for his aging mother Pearl until her passing. He sacrificed the pursuit of greater fame to honor the bond of blood, living a life of emotional solitude that few in the industry understood. He also bore the burden of being a guardian to a dying art form. As the world moved on to digital noise, he fought a lonely battle to keep the authentic sound of bluegrass alive, fearing that the music of his ancestors would fade into silence. He was a man out of time, an old soul, trapped in a modern world carrying the melancholy of the mountains in his smile. As of November 25, 2025, Randall Franks is 59 years old. He remains the Appalachian ambassador of the fiddle, a steadfast guardian of tradition. He didn't chase the hollow trophies of stardom. Instead, he chose the richness of heritage. He continues to write, play, and teach, ensuring that the faded melody of the past is never truly lost. His legacy is one of fidelity to his family, to his music, and to his God. He reminds us that sometimes the most heroic thing a man can do is simply stay true to who he is. The cases in Sparta are all closed now. The final credits have rolled. What's left is the ghost of a powerful on-screen friendship and the heartbreaking reality of what happened when the cameras stopped. We lost Howard Rollins, the brilliant, controlled detective who couldn't conquer his own demons, his life a quiet tragedy of immense talent lost too soon. And we watched Carroll O'Connor, the tough, principled chief, endure a father's ultimate nightmare, turning his devastating public grief into his life's final, most important cause. Their show was about justice, but their lives became a testament to a different kind of endurance, a solemn reminder of the deep human price often paid by the men who bring our heroes to life.